Now, demographic changes over the last 10 years made for some surprises back on November 2nd. Even so, only 4 districts saw the incumbent party lose a seat. 2, 3, 8, and 16. Adding 3 others that were closer than expected, 11, 21, and 38, and we're looking at 7, right? But that's a decade since the last districts were drawn. We're looking at 7 competitive elections out of 40 districts a decade after the districts were gerrymandered. That's not a healthy democracy. With so few competitive elections, people feel like their vote doesn't matter, so they don't vote. To engage New Jerseyans in government and elections, we must show them that their vote matters. Not just tell them how important it is. Otherwise, our words ring hollow. An example, LD 16 was widely expected to be competitive this year, and both parties aggressively tried to turn out voters. Turnout in the LD 16 race was up 23% this year compared to 2017. Now let's compare that to the governor's race statewide, where turnout was increased only by 19%. That 4% increase seems like a small number, but applied statewide, that's 90,000 more people voting. Let's compare that now to the largest upset in the state in LD3, where we saw about a 20% increase in turnout. If instead LD3 had matched LD 16's 23% turnout increase, that's 1,500 more voters. Had the outgoing Senate president's district been perceived as more competitive and had his campaign emphasized turnout the way that LD 16's campaign did, perhaps he would have stood a better chance to hold his seat. Furthermore, our governor won more votes in LD3 this year than he did in 2017, but this LD3, the incumbent senator lost votes compared to 2017. So the narrative that is, kind of pointing at the governor and at progressives to account for these losses doesn't really seem accurate. What seems accurate looking at the data is that lackluster Democratic voter turnout is to blame due to a perceived non-competitive district and perhaps a lack of voter engagement. I would urge folks in these type of elections to emphasize engaging with voters to improve our democracy and speak to issues that clearly support blue-collar, working-class people. And if you do that, you'll see more success. Back on topic. We must stop virtually drawing every district to be non-competitive. This cuts voters out of our democracy, especially when combined with New Jersey's unique, intentionally undemocratic primary ballot setup. This means stagnation, and this protects the systemic racism entrenched in our state government and history. New Jersey County Party leadership is disproportionately old, white, and men. So when party committee chairs pick candidates, they tend to pick people who look like them, and grant these candidates preferential ballot treatment on the county line. This rigs the primary election in their favor, to the point that no state rep who is an incumbent has lost a primary election on the line in 12 years. When districts are drawn to be non-competitive after this, these disproportionately white and male candidates then win the general election. So not only do people's votes not end up mattering in either the primary or the general, our legislature, as a result, doesn't represent the diversity of our state. Is it any wonder that New Jerseyans are disengaged when we're repeatedly shown that our votes don't matter? Some demographics on our legislature, compared to the latest census. We've got about 30% of New Jersey legislators that are women. Obviously, that's a lot less than half, ballpark. We're 27th nationally in women's representation in the legislature. That's behind Montana, Wisconsin, and Ohio. Half the legislature is over 59 years old, and a whopping 92% are over 40. Millennials are grossly underrepresented. People between 25 and 40 years old, like me, I'm 30, deserve far more representation than 9 representatives out of 120. 73% of the legislature is white, versus about 55% of New Jersey residents. So that's a 25% overrepresentation, right? Where does that come from? Well, we're looking at about 2.5% of the legislature that is Asian American versus 10% of New Jersey residents. So that's 7.5 there. That's 7.5 right there. And 7.5% of the legislature is Hispanic or Latino versus about 22% in the New Jersey population. So that makes up a lot of the rest of it. This lack of diversity directly results from our unhealthy democracy. This is what lets mostly white, male county party chairs predetermine election outcomes to favor people that look like I will in about 30 years, at the expense of everyone else, especially people of color. New Jersey's legacy is rife with systemic racism, and it is long past time to take decisive action to fix this. So, in closing, I urge you to do 2 things. Number 1, draw competitive, fair districts where the voters are able to decide who their representatives are. This is necessary for a healthy democracy. It is foundational. And if we don't want more things like what happened on January 6th to happen, we have to demonstrate that our democracy is healthy and that people's voices are being heard everywhere in the US. Second, we have to draw districts that enhance rather than diminish the voices of people of color, of women, and young people. Given our state's history of systemic racism, communities of color in particular must have their voices heard. All right, that's all I've got. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate this, and have a great holiday.
Well, thank you, Mr. Marchica. That was very passionate and very thought-provoking testimony, and certainly we will take that under very, very serious consideration.
I appreciate it.
Happy holidays.
You as well.